It's probably going to take a few bursts of motivation before I can get this podcast back on track. But then again, it's not going to be an Ceterox episode without a struggle here and there. They call me Ed, sometimes Seth, but mostly just Rocks, and you're listening to Ceterox. Let's talk about anything and everything till we reach the end of our thinking capacity. I actually typed this intro the last minute as usual because my dogs are barking non-stop. Impeccable timing as always, and I didn't want to ruin my train of thought. So at the time of recording, it's supposed to be the night before the upload if I force myself to follow the original upload days. But considering the fact that I haven't really heard from a soul that has listened to my podcast, so I thought, well, let's just make life easy for me. I've actually been looking at my Instagram page, and I get a lot of likes. I guess it's because of my good use of hashtags, but then hashtags just gets me the likes, but not really much of the interactions that I'm looking for when it comes to engagement. But this podcast is really just like my passion project, or just a creative outlet for me. So I'm not really pushing to become like well known or famous or to have like listeners. I guess having listeners for me is just secondary at this point, that I don't really see myself having any listeners just yet. So let's just go on with it. That's when we segue into the theme, and that is Simple Saturdays. I love how that is so fitting with everything that's going on. My life has been pretty chaotic lately, and I don't really want to talk too much about the story, but you can browse a little bit into the show notes on the previous episode as to a little bit of a glimpse of what happened, why last week's episode was late. But yeah, that's it. No matter how chaotic life gets, I'm slowly teaching myself to just say no and let things go, and just be as they are. That phrase in itself is such a good topic starter, but I'm not about to get into that today or now, so let's just go ahead with the theme. Anyway, Simple Saturdays are about taking it easy and just talk about daily life, the simple pleasures of living minimally, being sustainable, talking about the wonders of nature and the universe, or just fathoming the existence of cats and other creatures. While that sounds like a great idea for future episodes, just taking it easy and talking about daily life, I did have something prepared for recording. So I'm going to go ahead and just hop right into it. I'm looking at my list, and I don't know if this will reach an hour or if we're going to go overboard again, but let's just go with the flow. I actually titled this podcast, as of the draft, it's about my aesthetic and values, but that's just gonna change according to how I feel like it later on, since the last episode was about my relationship with music, and I don't like to make it the episodes a little bit too familiar with each other. But I don't know, I don't want to get too much into the technicalities right now, but I guess I should just give a little bit of intro about how I'm a minimalist and everything, and I do try my best to be sustainable. But I guess the best way for me to describe myself is being mindful, just being conscious and aware of myself, of the people around me, and my surroundings, like my interaction and my relationship with them, and how I want to keep things light, simple, and just, I don't know, filled with, I guess, valuable things. Like, I don't expect things to always be like good and perfect, so I just thought, like, just keeping it just simple. The best word for it is simple and just mindful. Now, I don't remember if I mentioned this in the podcast trailer, but a huge influence for starting this podcast is because of the few favorites that I have that I listen to, which include the Mustards and the Minimalists. I think I may have mentioned Matt Diavella, and these people are all minimalists per label. Now, minimalists have different like stereotypes or like different types of minimalists, and if I dive in a little bit too much about minimalism, although it would seem appropriate since this is the first Simple Saturdays episode, it's gonna take forever. And I really want to go through my list. So I guess I'm just not gonna talk about them too much. But I did just want to mention the names as to why I which is why I wanted to talk about these people. Yeah, I'm just looking at my list again, and yeah, those are the main 3 people. But there's actually like a lot of other influencers that I follow that are also living a minimal and sustainable or just mindful lifestyle. And I guess they'll be worth mentioning in the future episodes. But for now, I just segued into talking about them because my list actually comes from them. So the first list that I'm gonna talk about are actually about the Minimalist Rules. And I wrote the header as the most expensive things. And this has something to do with your values as a person. And thinking about it, I'm not sure if my list is like up to date, but we'll see as it goes. So the whole concept of this is writing 10 things in your life that you consider expensive, and 10 objects in your life that, preferably you spent with your own money that is considered the most expensive in your life. For me, I wrote, 10 things here and 10 things on the other list. And while I said preferably spend with my own money, there are some things that I do own that I didn't spend with my own money that I own. So I thought I just included them on the list. Now, see, the word expensive is very relative. Is it expensive in terms of price tag? In terms of value? In terms of sentiment? In terms of priority? And I think it's really worth talking about. Now, I'm not sure if I'm going to talk about my list per item, or if I'm going to talk about them in summary first and go through them one by one. But let's just flow right into it, I guess. I need to take a sip of water. Let me pause. Okay, so actually we're already 8 minutes into this podcast and we haven't started anything yet. So we're already like 1/6 done in the podcast. Cool. Anyway, so I guess let's get right into the superficial stuff first, or as how I see it, and talk about the most expensive objects that I own. Now, I actually got really specific and talked about actual items with brand and everything. And thinking about it now, this may be the most inaccurate thing ever, but because we want things to be tangible, I thought, why not just, talk about it? I don't know. Okay, so the first thing that I wrote here is my laptop. I actually, in terms of the most amount of money I spent on one item, I feel like my laptop stands at the tippy top, because it's actually well, am I gonna talk about the model of my laptop and everything, like just get right into it? I guess, I don't know. It's actually I actually use an Asus VivoBook S14 series of 2020 or 2020. Controversial way of saying the year. And I've actually saved up for it for quite a long time, and I've been contemplating on what type of laptop I wanted to get for myself. And I guess this came out because I really like the specifications or specs, and it was recommended to me by a friend. And it's actually, the most expensive in terms of, I used my own money to buy it. But let's just go through the rest of the list, which I'm sure there may be other items that are more expensive or maybe, just as the same. Then the next thing I wrote here is actually my tablet. Before I talk about my tablet, I actually watched this quick clip. I'm not sure if it's from a TED Talk or from a stand-up show, but I remember getting it from the Minimalists, like weekly emails. How there's this comedian who talks about how everybody is just stuck on their screens. If they're not looking at a computer screen from a desktop or a laptop, they're looking at a tablet. If they're not looking at a tablet, they're looking at their phones. If they're not looking at their phones, they're on their smartwatches or whatever. Like, we're always glued to a certain screen. If not the computer, there's the television. There's just always some sort of, And at first, I commented on that video that I couldn't relate because I didn't really own a lot of stuff back then. I didn't have my laptop and tablet at the time. And I'm not really into smartwatches. Like a good topic maybe for the future. But I thought that I was, being really mindful and stuff. But as somebody who valued media and consuming, I guess, in terms of music, film, and other creative works digitally, I tried my best to be as mindful as possible so that I wouldn't really mindlessly scroll through online. But I think that's like another topic for a different time. But anyway, I just wanted to mention that. And then I got my tab and my laptop, and now I just feel like I'm also in that hole. But I try my best to row safely while in that hole. Does that make any sense? Anyway, so the tablet I'm using is actually a Xiaomi Mi Pad 4. And there's like a story behind this. I actually wanted to wait for the Mi Pad 5 to come out before, so that I could get like the latest model of everything, just so, we're up to date with like the latest whatever specs is there. But then they're not really releasing anything, and it's actually inexpensive. So if the new thing came out, I could just give this away and get the new one. I don't know, that sounds so privileged. But anyway, that's the second thing on my list here. And the next thing here is actually my phone. The phone I'm using is actually a swap with my mom. She actually used to use this phone. But the thing is, it's the Google OS. What is that thing called? It's an Android One phone, but it's still Xiaomi brand, and it's the model Mi A3. Now, for those of you who may be unfamiliar with Xiaomi, it's a Chinese brand and a little bit controversial, but I'm not gonna get right into it. You can just go read about it online because it may remind you of a certain brand that resembles a fruit, minus the expensive tag price. But I don't know. I'm not gonna say anymore. In terms of that phone, it's actually relatively expensive, but I didn't really spend money on it compared to the phone that I swapped with my mom. And that model is actually also Xiaomi, which is Redmi 7, but it's not as expensive. And if we're also going to talk about my old phone, if you heard my previous episodes, my phone actually got stolen. Did I talk about that in a previous episode. But anyway, my phone actually got stolen. I'm not sure if I'm gonna talk about that again if I haven't already. But yeah, so I had to buy my own phone twice. So it was just a little bit disappointing, but that was like one of the things that I had to really save up on and spend money on. Even though they're not as expensive, it's still different when, back then you don't have a job, you're not making your own money, so you're just saving, from doing chores or allowances. Yeah. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm spacing out a little bit because I am suddenly remembering those memories again. So I added a new thing to this list, and it's actually a washing machine. It actually hasn't arrived yet, but we actually bought a new washing machine because the one we're using so far, while it's electric, it's actually still manual in the sense it's a top load that uses a timer, and then you have to change the water yourself, you have to change the clothes by yourself, whereas the one we're buying is actually automatic. While I'm not buying it full price, I am paying a huge percentage of it, and yeah, that's relatively expensive too. We're talking about washing machines now. Okay, and then the next thing here on the list, I put this standing platform, a vibration platform, and I'm not sure if it's a fad or if it's like a legit exercise machine, but it's this thing you stand on and it kind of jiggles side to side. I've actually used it before, like actively, and it did help me lose a lot of weight, but it's also really good for your bone health and your posture, and in terms of like getting a massage or something on your body to get the circulation going. Yeah, it's a pretty interesting machine, and actually my dad got it for me. I didn't really spend a thing on it, and I'm pretty grateful because that's one of the most valuable like objects that I own. Yeah. And then the last few things here are actually fashion items, and I'm just gonna like quickly go through them. So I have these 2 watches from Swatch, both from my dad. One is an automatic watch called Body and Soul. You can just go ahead and Google it, or maybe if I remember, I'll leave it in the podcast show notes. If not, then just Google it. And then another one from the original series called Look Through. So you can see that I really enjoy skeleton watches, or like, the watches where you can see the mechanism. I find it really cool. I usually get this from my dad during special occasions. Like, for example, the Body and Soul was my very first automatic, like really fancy kind of watch. It's probably the most expensive watch that I own. And I don't really think I'm gonna talk about watches in a different episodes because I actually really love watches. So stay tuned for that, I guess. And then I have another watch from Guess, which I got on my 19th birthday, also from my dad. There's also a story behind it. I used to watch this YouTuber, Meredith Foster, and she made this graduation video. And I'm not sure if she was advertising it or she just wanted to feature it on her video, but it's a Michael Kors oversized rose gold watch, and that was like the trend back then. I'm not sure if it was Rihanna who started, all that oversized like gold or rose gold jewelry back then, but I really liked it. And for like a few years after waiting, to ask my dad to get it for me, he finally got it for me on my birthday, and it's still one of my favorite watches to this day. And then apart from watches, the rest are shoes. So I have this pair of Adidas shoes. It's super funky. It's so blue. It reminds me of Dory from Finding Nemo. It's actually pretty inexpensive, but then if you're going to consider like the original retail price, it's pretty pricey. But I got it from like a sports, what do you call it? Like, it's not really a factory, but like an outlet. It's an outlet, yeah. So it didn't really have any defects or some sort, but they sold it there for much cheaper, and it's original because I got that back in Malaysia and at the KLCC mall, if you guys are interested to know. Anyway, and then the other pair of shoes are these Fila shoes. They're just some classic white sneakers or trainers. I still don't know the difference, but just some white sneakers. Just something classic, but I spent that with my own money. Now Fila is also a pretty expensive shoe, but I got that for like 50 off, so I guess it's cheap in terms of how much I paid for it, but in terms of value, I guess, it's one of my few favorite things. And then last thing I put here is an Esprit scarf that I got from my aunt. On a quick story behind it, I wanted to get this scarf that my aunt also happened to like, so I just let her have it, and then she surprised me with an Esprit scarf, which is way more expensive than the scarf that I wanted to get, and I was just like so shook, like, wow, thank you so much. And like thinking about it now, I think I may have to update this list in the future, but not in this episode because it's gonna take absolutely forever. But I created this list based on items which are pretty pricey, so that's like considered most expensive, so I by tag price. But if I had to list 10 objects again that I consider expensive and valuable to me, this would be a completely different list. And while I'm somebody who doesn't like to put sentiment on objects, I prefer to put sentiment on people, relationships, and experiences. It's a completely different list. And oh gosh, I'm not sure if I'm gonna do a new episode about that, but I might consider just having it on the show notes as an added bonus content. So just read the show notes, guys, I guess. I don't really get anything out of this podcast. It's not monetized. I'm spending my own resources on this. I'm just enjoying myself, creative outlet, and just doing my own thing. So yeah, I'm not really here to, like product placements or whatever. Okay, that's it for the most expensive objects in terms of things that I own. In terms of tag price. Yeah. So let's go ahead and go to the other list, and this is where things get contrasting, because I guess I'm gonna explain now the whole point of this exercise with the minimalist rules, because it kind of teaches you that the most expensive things in your life and the most expensive objects that you own normally don't really overlap. Like if something's overlap, then I guess you do find a lot of value in the item that it gives value in your life, but at the end of the day, it's usually different for people, and here's how. So I'm just gonna quickly read my list. So the tippy top of my list, I'm gonna burp real quick, I'm sorry. Am I keeping that on the recording? Okay, let's keep that on recording. I'm so sorry. This is so awkward. Okay. On the tippy top of my list, I actually put there my calling. And when I say calling, I mean it as like my life purpose. And, not to sound cringy for some people who may find this cringy, but I do have... I firmly believe and I have like strong faith in God. And I love to keep myself active in church activities and religion. But it's not the same as, being a mindless fanatic. So don't really look at it that way. I see it more as like a lifestyle, as a value and principle, which is why I think it's the most important thing for me. It's what keeps me sane. It's what keeps me grounded. It's what allows me to soar high, at the same time. So I find that to be the most important thing in my life, as opposed to what everybody says that, they think family is the most important thing, love's the most important thing. I mean, yes. Yeah, it's all included in my calling. And love God above anything else. Then there's, love your family, love your neighbor, love yourself. I guess it all falls into place eventually. It's just that it's at the tippy top for me to make sure that I'm serving God well, I'm obeying his laws. I'm, being a good Christian, being a good person, and, having strong, unwavering principles. That's something really expensive and valuable for me that is non-negotiable. Absolutely not. But does that mean, I might talk about this in a different episode about my calling and everything, because it's something that I really am interested in sharing with people, which is my faith. So I guess stay tuned for that. I don't want to get too deep, but then everything here, even though it's a simple Saturdays episode, I am sharing my life with you in like a deep manner. So don't, let's just stay chill for now. The next here on my list, I put health, safety, and security. I guess they're all, kind of like the same in terms of stability, I guess. So there's health. They say health is wealth, like the most expensive thing. I'm somebody who rarely gets sick, but when I do get sick, I get sick for a long time, or I get sick like crazy. Oh, wow, that's like, how many times did I say sick? So for me to have like a healthy body, a healthy mind, or healthy relationships, or healthy in all terms of life is super important for me. I don't know how to go about this without going too deep into the topic. So that's that, I guess. I don't know. I might go crazy, so I won't. And then there's safety. In terms of, safety in terms of like staying away from danger, staying out of trouble, staying out of whatever's going on with the world, the C word. Safety in terms of being responsible with life, not bringing harm to others or to yourself. Then I put here security in terms of, I guess, in terms of lifestyle, career, responsibilities, how I set myself up for the future, the present. Yeah, there's that. And then there's my relationships. Now, this list is in no particular order except for the tippy top that I mentioned earlier. Or maybe it is, I'm not sure. But yeah, I put relationships next because I'm somebody who treasures my relationship a lot. And I think I'm going to talk about this in our next Social Sundays episode, which is the next episode after this, but I'm not sure. I don't know. But relationships are very important for me, and as much as possible, I never want to give anybody any reason to ruin our relationships. And if I do, I'm somebody who usually gets traumatized by it. And as somebody with very poor mental health, I tend to really spiral when it comes to failed relationships with other people. And sometimes it can't be helped to have failed relationships or toxic relationships that you have to forgo. So I don't want to go too deep into that right now, but I guess that's a way for me to describe just how valuable relationships are for me. And also, as an introvert, I don't have a lot of people in my life. So the people who are in my life, I consider them very important to me. So there's that. Then next here is time. I believe that time is the most expensive currency there is in the world. Because, you can have all the money in the world, but everybody shares the same amount of time in terms of once you spend that time, that's it. There's no turning back. There's no getting it back. You can make time. You can adjust time, but you can never just get back time. You know what I mean? Like, yes, that's it. I mean, unless there's a way to time travel, which we can talk about sci-fi in another episode, but yeah. It's pretty crazy. But time is super important. I hate wasting time. I hate wasting other people's time. I really respect time. I hate being late. Might talk about my principles in terms of like pet peeves or like the kind of standards that I hold for myself and some people at a bare minimum. And you're gonna hear quite a lot about time. And then I also added here privilege. I think it's always important to acknowledge having privilege, whether that's having food to eat, having a house to live in, clothes to wear, not worrying about things that people may experience, such as oppression, poverty. What else? I don't know. Like sufferings, trials and tribulations. I just used synonyms, but yeah, I considered myself privileged. I'm grateful for my privilege. And even though if we're going to compare it to the amount of privilege that other people has, mine may not really surmount to anything, but I am acknowledging that it's there. So I just thought it's like worth mentioning as something that is valuable to me, that I have privilege. Okay, sorry, that was an awkward chuckle. Then the next thing here I put intellect. Now I'm not smart in terms of like not a genius or anything, but I mean if we're gonna talk about my IQ, I'm not so sure. They say I have high IQ because I took tests and my IQ is said to be pretty high. Like the previous IQ test that I took, they said I'm a 170 IQ, but that sounded impossible, so we may have to challenge that in the future. So, but I'm talking about intellect in terms of having access to knowledge, being knowledgeable, somebody being curious, somebody who wants to know things, or somebody who asks a lot of questions and being able to retain information. Now, if you're gonna talk about being smart and stuff, I have my flaws too, but I am not gonna deny myself the fact that I do have some skills. I do have some form of intellect in some places that may be different depending on the person in terms of useful intellect, but I am gonna mention that too because that's something I value a lot. And then the next thing here on my list, I put empathy. Have I talked about? Have I? I'm not sure. I'm just getting brain fart here, but I'm somebody who empathizes with people a lot. I may not have been in a lot of shoes, but I can really feel what people are feeling, even if I haven't really been there. That's actually kind of sympathy in terms, but then I'm an empath in terms of being able to be. I'm a highly sensitive person. I can feel my surroundings. I can feel people around me. I can just read a room quite quickly, quite awkwardly, but I guess empathy is also really important for me. I consider it as really valuable because not a lot of people have the capacity to have like a deeper understanding of what's going on with people. People tend to have problems with communication and misinterpretation, and being emphatic or empathetic is, I guess, an asset or a skill, or I don't know what it's called, a trait that not a lot of people have, that I'm grateful to have, just because I want people to know that there's someone out there who understands them, or maybe we may not have gone through what you have, but we have gone through the same feelings that you're experiencing. We may not have the answers, but we're here for you. And that's how I view being emphatic to be. And last but not the least, here I put skills / talents. So like like similar to intellect, I guess. I do know things. I can do things, and I guess I can talk about them in a different episode as to like what are the things that I can do. But I guess in terms of technical or like professional skills, it's a little bit more generic, like music, writing, creative, I don't know, design, I don't know, fashion, interior designing, tiny home creations. I don't know. Those are just like a random mention of my hobbies, but I don't know. I guess there's skills and talent in the sense when somebody can commend you for being good at a certain like, it's not genre, a certain category, or like a certain skill of being able to do stuff. So that actually ends my list of most expensive stuff in terms of life and objects. And while I did mention earlier that I might have to update the most expensive objects in my life in terms of, I guess, other things than the price tag, I guess it's gonna be sentiment. But I'm kind of glad that I still stand by the most expensive things in my life, which is mostly those traits and I guess would you call them traits? The only thing here that's not a trait is actually like time. So yeah. But yeah. How many times did I say but yeah? Anyway, so that's it for that list and under the minimalist rules. And I thought I'd segue a little bit into aesthetic, since I talked about my values as a person, and suddenly like a segue into some of the things that I own that I consider expensive. I actually thought of this differently. I didn't really know how I was gonna get into that topic, but I thought I'd just get into it anyway. But let's talk about my aesthetic. I call it aesthetic because I got this concept from Jenny Mustard of the Mustards, and it was actually about finding your own style. But then I thought it would also apply to things like creating vision boards and mood boards. And I wanted to talk about it in the sense of how people are so distinct with each other. We can have similarities, but I love how differences make us so unique, but in a good way. So I'm just gonna like quickly talk about the different things that I find pretty in terms of aesthetic, and how it's a little bit hard to narrow myself down into a certain kind of like style or certain kind of did I just say curtain earlier? Into a certain kind of stereotype, if you would prefer to call it something. Now, I actually talked about this with my cousin the other night because we were sharing ideas for aesthetic, and somehow I told my cousin that if I'm gonna narrow myself down into anything, I would just say something minimal, sporty, and corporate. But then that's in terms of like fashion, I guess. I don't know. My mind changes about things that are not super serious fairly quickly, or I don't know. I also don't know about that statement. But I guess that's just a way for me to describe my style. So this doesn't necessarily apply to other aspects of my life, because everything in this list is actually really me as well. So you can't really go wrong on this list, but you're gonna see soon why. So I don't really think that this is categorized, but I tried my best to keep them somewhat like categorized in a way, but we'll see. I tried, but it doesn't have to be like correct, or doesn't have to be like I'm kind of like just going off. Like, my cue on this podcast is to reach the end of my thinking capacity, but you probably already realized that I reach the end of my thinking capacity every 5 seconds. Well, I don't really see the point. Anyway, let's just like get into the topic. I'm just going a little bit crazy now. I don't know what I'm talking about anymore. I'm just gonna go ahead and start with my list. Actually, while I'm stalling, I'm actually trying to organize my my list, so it's a little bit more categorized by a certain theme, but these things are so distinct with one another, you can't really go wrong-ish. Not go wrong. You can't really perfectly categorize everything, but okay, I'm done stalling. We're gonna start with my list. So starting at the TP top. Okay, I put here earthy. I guess you would probably see this as something bohemian, but in terms of like fashion aesthetic, but I like earthy in the sense the things on my list here include anything nature, imagining lots of trees, fields, mountains, the sky, the sea. I had to really pause for quite a while because my dogs were just barking nonstop like monkeys. And I'm not sure if they're done, but I don't know. This is just another episode in this podcast. Yep. Luckily, I could do some edits while on this app, but I'm not sure. I have to give it a listen again later if the final output is okay-ish. But sometimes I could just get into my boiling point, so don't think I'm this like super duper goody two shoes. Wait, that is the term, goody two shoes, but I'm not that perfect. I have my limits too. But let's just talk about my aesthetic again, I guess. I think the last thing I mentioned was about the sea, and I'm just gonna go right through my list in terms of things that are earthy, I guess. But well, yeah. Then I talk about birds and flowers. I love birds a lot, especially swallows, chickens, swans. Penguins are my favorite birds. And then I love small flowers like baby's breath. I did have like a fairly long joke with my cousin about baby's breath because it sounds like a very creepy flower. Baby's breath. Do you have to sacrifice a baby to get a flower? Anyway, it's actually known as gypsophila or million star. Those are like the other names for that. And other flowers I like are like the cotton flowers, lavenders. Basically just small flowers or any plants with really pretty leaves. Something like wisteria. Yeah, wisteria is actually a flower too. It's a flowering plant. It's so beautiful. Wow. It's just so breathtaking. But I have other flowers I like to like blossoms. I appreciate every type of bird and flower or animals in general, but those are just like the few favorites that I have on top of mind. The next thing I put here are the moon and stars. I love outer space. I have a phobia of megalophobia, so like I guess giant things up close kind of terrify me, or the unknown, that there's like a giant thing in outer space or under the ocean is kind of scary to think about right now. But I do appreciate it still in terms of aesthetic, like the galaxy stuff looks pretty. The ocean, the visible ocean is beautiful. I love seashells and pearls. That's so pretty. I also, my favorite aquatic creature should be the narwhals. And then, although it's a little bit off topic, it's still in the same like category, I guess. It's winter. I love winter, cold stuff, cold places. So like Arctic, subarctic. So that's it for that category of, things that I find really pretty. So I'm somebody, I love clouds. Like I appreciate, the things around me in terms of like the natural world. So even if it's just like a simple tree to somebody's eyes, I find it pretty. Even if it's like weeds, the flowers, pretty cloud shapes, the sunsets. My personal Instagram page used to be filled with just sunsets that I took from the pandemic lockdown. Okay, that's the last time I'm gonna mention the pandemic in this podcast, but I just wanted to like quickly share that bit. I don't know why I sound so allergic to the C word, but anyway. And then let's proceed to like the next category. Actually, it's not really a category, but I guess they kind of suit each other. I don't know. So the thing here is steampunk. Steampunk looks so cool. I don't know why I'm really into it, but I guess it's like this whole oldies thing, and it's a bit Victorian, and I guess I like the Victorian era in terms of fashion and aesthetic, although not so much the kind of life they go through during the Victorian era. That's just an opinion though. And something about the countryside, although countryside kind of belongs to the first category, but I guess it's about like Green Gables kind of feeling, or like Little Women, Jane Austen. If we're gonna put some literary works into the picture, something regal, something like very oldies, I guess. And then I also put here goth. So I guess goth is sort of kind of like Victorian too, in the sense ish. I don't know my history that well, but if you're talking about in terms of fashion, and I guess it's Middle Ages. I don't really want to talk about history right now because I am not that good at history, but I guess you get the idea. But then if you talk about goth, you'd probably think about the color black, Lolita culture in Japan, those kawaii. Although I like kawaii too as a different aesthetic, goth and kawaii. But I mentioned those more as a Japanese fashion subculture and aesthetic as opposed to I guess historical aesthetic. I don't know, maybe your podcast host is unsure. And so lastly, I also added things like I love like haunted house aesthetic, graveyard, Halloween, horror in short, I guess, just to kind of put an umbrella term on everything. I love horror like as a genre. If I haven't already mentioned that in our second episode where I just talk about nothing but zombies, but we're gonna talk about like I guess horror, everything else in future episodes, but it's really worth mentioning, at least for me, as a form of aesthetic. Black isn't really my favorite color. I have a favorite color. It's actually navy blue or midnight blue. But in terms of things that I own and wear and comfortable of having around me, it's usually black. Although I do like white too, just not as clothes because I stain easily in many aspects. So I'm not gonna get into that much, but yeah. And then here's like the aesthetic category where I feel like people can relate to more. I feel like burping again. Sorry, that was gross. That was so gross. Excuse me, I'm so sorry. And then there's here. I'm just gonna read them all at once. I put here minimal, muted, corporate, subtle. I don't like to stand out that much. I like attention from the right people, right place at the right time. I like to keep things simple. I like to blend in. I like things quiet, peaceful, just harmonious. I don't know what's to put it. I'm a bit more on the formal side ish as opposed to casual, even though I'm a pretty chill person. I like things in order, organized. And if anything is gonna be extra, I like things to be like subtle, like not super over the top or extravagant. Although I do appreciate my fair share of extravagant and over the top, I just have a more preference towards the subtle side. So if we're gonna segue into the next category, I guess you're gonna see, like, how it's so contrasting, it's so contradicting. Because I like classic stuff in terms of fashion and aesthetic. When they say, "Oh, that's classic," Like I like those concepts. Like vintage, I find vintage very pretty. Anything that just passed on through the ages is very, very pretty. And I guess if I'm talking about culture wise, also in terms of architecture, I appreciate Filipino architecture. And I guess anything Asian in the sense, I find it really pretty. If we can modernize our, architecture or aesthetic, that'd be super cool to have in like a future home or something, I guess. Or at least like a hats off, or like a nod, a subtle nod to the things that I like and appreciate. Maybe in the future, we'll see. Then I put here Scandinavian. All those things. What are those terms? I guess the window umbrella for it is Scandinavian. But I guess in terms of like aesthetic, I think it's something like IKEA or something. I don't know. I forgot those terms that they used. Why did I just suddenly got a brain fart? I forgot what it's called. If I probably go into there's the Swedish death cleaning. It's super funny in terms of just the name. I can't believe I forgot the name of that whole thing. I'm gonna pause quickly and go into the Mustard's YouTube channel because I'm having a lot of like dead air here, just trying to think about it. So I'll be right back. There, I finally remember. I actually butchered the pronunciation as Hidge, but it's actually like Huga. And the other one is Lagom. I'm not sure. I'm just really butchering everything. There's actually like a lot of concepts. There's also Kuri or Kurie. I'm not sure. There's Ikigai. There's Ubuntu. But just when in terms of like Scandinavian aesthetic, and then finding balance. Then there's also like the cozy and comfortable and Huga. I'm so sorry. I'm gonna stop saying the words now because I can't say them properly. Anyway, those are like the few Scandinavian or I don't know, Swedish, I think, aesthetics that I really like and appreciate. And then there's Zen. I really appreciate Oriental also in terms of culture and aesthetic, architecture, and I just call them aesthetic. Those Japanese, Chinese, old Korean or Korean, like all those oldies. Aesthetic. The only word that suits is like aesthetic, because I guess it's a good umbrella term for the few things that I like. So it's things like culture, architecture, fashion, principles, And then on the other side of the world again, it's Greek. I really like Greek in terms of like the mythos and also like the aesthetic, the literature, and it's really pretty. Like, I don't know, I'm just gonna give you guys a glimpse into my dream wedding. and it has a lot to do with Atlantean. So it's like underwater Greek stuff. It's like a mixture of the few aesthetics that I really like, but that was just like a quick glimpse into it. And I don't even know if I'm gonna get married in the future, if I have a future, but there's no price to dream. And then we're on the last few categories here on my list. There's sporty. It really reflects on my fashion sense in terms of my loungewear consists of dry fit or like sporty fibers, so that my sweat doesn't really seep through or leaves marks on my clothing, which I really hate when it comes to clothes. And I wear like the same style. It's just a black shirt and black shorts. And then I guess they differ a little bit in terms of style, but they all share this similar fabric. And it's kind of like my home uniform. I might talk about that in detail in like a fashion episode or something. But it's been like my aesthetic in terms of I like streetwear. I appreciate it's like streetwear in terms of like wearing sporty fits, wearing tracksuits. That's a fashion thing. While there may be some people who might hate it or what, but I like it because it's comfortable. I really enjoy sport fabrics, the comfort too, and the feeling of you're already 50% there from doing a workout and being active without actually having to do a workout. I don't know. And yeah, just that for being sporty. I might dive into it a little bit more when it comes to fashion in the future, or just talking about sports in general. Then the last few things on my list is cyberpunk, sci-fi, fantasy, and suburban city night. Those are a little bit more specific, but it's a lot of like nighttime, neon lights, lots of technology, like futuristic, dystopic, utopic, I don't know what you might call it. And those things are just really so fascinating to me, especially when it comes to landscape architectures, cityscapes, that's the word for it. And then in terms of like cyborg fashion or technology and Black Mirror-esque, I don't know, yeah, just look forward to future episodes, I guess, on other things we're gonna dive into in the future. I am starting to talk like a robot right now. I'm just gonna go ahead and just round everything up. So that's everything on my aesthetic in terms of what I'm in the mood for, or like vision boards on how it's a little bit difficult to put a single aesthetic on me, just because I can't really seem to just stay in one place. I don't know. Okay, that's enough dead air in one episode. I'm gonna just go ahead and try and create an impromptu outro. Whoa there. As you guys already know, I always say I'm not active on social media, just because I'm really not. I'm more focused on other things that I enjoy doing apart from that is not social media related. So I guess kind of sorry in advance, but I do have an Instagram page for this podcast where it usually gives updates when a new episode is uploaded, because I don't really share anywhere else. And you can also subscribe to my YouTube channel, because that's the main place or the main channel where I have video or like visuals, but it's just a loop actually for my podcast if you're not into podcast streaming. But if you are into podcast streaming, Ceterox is on Anchor FM. So my podcast is distributed to mainstream platforms of your choice. So we have Spotify, iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and other places where, you know, your preferred podcast platform. I'm so sorry. There's so much dead airs here. I'm just getting brain farts here and there, but I'm only using the basic version of Anchor. So if you have a certain streaming platform of your choice and my podcast is not there, then just go look at the mainstream ones if you don't mind. It's just YouTube, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and Apple Podcasts that I think are mainstream. But just go to my Anchor channel to see where else it's available. And if you ever want to interact with me or anything, you can just message me on Instagram or go to my blogger page for show notes at ceterox.blogspot.com, and you can just use the hashtag @Ceterox for all that SEO and low-key marketing jazz. I'm actually just looking at my script again. I'm cheating because I'm not so good at impromptu when I want to be organized, so whatever. You can check out the time cards and skip to the part you like. I'm gonna do my best to edit it, but yeah, there's that. And I don't want to talk about a second YouTube channel that doesn't exist yet because I am interested in having highlights. But at this point, since I'm just making time cards for every episode, I don't think I'm gonna bother creating a YouTube channel for just highlights alone because I don't really want to create too much clutter on the internet. Yeah. And that's my cue. I've reached the end of my thinking capacity. Let me know your thoughts and takeaways. In the meantime, till next time. Bye. Ooh, just barely over an hour. Okay, bye.